So was it when you were sleeping in bed that he most often came and put his paw there on your arm?
Yeah, it was always when we went to bed. At that time, we also had a ramp beside the bed because Tony, before he had passed his last couple of years, he couldn't hop into bed anymore. So my dad actually built a ramp for Tony so that he could, walk up the ramp.
Nice.
And then Apollo would use it as well, and come up the ramp and crawl over Becky and then kind of curl up between us. But he would always have his back to Becky, and then he would face me and put his left paw on my arm. He always had to touch my arm, so if it was covered up with a blanket, I'd pull the blanket down. And he'd have to put his paw on my arm. Yeah, we miss them a lot.
Steve met while I was doing a pretty big rescue with Toronto Wildlife Centre in 2019. There was a nursery, like a garden centre, and they had been seeing this family of foxes, and we got a lead from this finder named Steve. A whole team of us from Toronto Wildlife Centre, I'm a volunteer with them, came and we spent the day catching all these foxes. The only one left was the mother fox. So I left my number with Steve and we set a trap for the fox and ended up catching her.
No, I did not have to ask for Becky's phone number because as she was living in Guelph at the time, she was the closest contact for Toronto Wildlife Centre. And that's when Becky approached me and said, "Hi, I'm Becky, and so I'm going to be the contact for these foxes, and here's my number." And I went, "Oh, great, this beautiful woman's just walking up to me and giving me her number. Like, this is a good day." Like, all right, I hope there's more foxes around here. And yeah, that's kind of how it all began. We just, I don't know, a month or two later, then I was out there rescuing as well, so.
I don't waste any time.
No, it moves fast.
So I fostered Tony and Apollo in 2009. They were very feral and they were rescued and brought to me for socialization. My job was basically to make them adoptable. Tony and Apollo were brothers. They were pretty wild, couldn't handle them or touch them when I first got them. And I would just go in and sit with them for hours a day, try to lure them with treats, or I would just sit and read a book to get them accustomed to my presence. Apollo was really timid. And so Tony would kind of do things first and then Apollo would follow. They did everything together. So when the rescue told me that they were going to be adopted out to separate homes, I just couldn't bear the thought of that. So I adopted them myself. Apollo was always just more timid, and Tony would always just kind of put himself into the scene and come to, for cuddles, where Apollo would maybe sit back. And I think he was very content, but he didn't really come and seek out that affection from other people besides me, really, until Steve came along.
Apollo, he just seemed to really connect to me, and I think part of that, Tony and Becky have a very tight bond. I think maybe he was also searching to have a special bond. I think that's part of the reason him and I bonded so well. I kind of became his person. I just earned Apollo's trust that way, I think.
Tony and Apollo had health problems from an early age. Tony, from a young age, he had inflammatory bowel disease. So they had these, on again, off again problems. We did eventually discover that maybe his inflammatory bowel disease had progressed into cancer in his bowel. So we treated him with oral chemotherapy meds and steroids. And then, as is the case with many pets, I think, who are on steroids long-term, he developed diabetes. Then we went through this delicate balancing act of, can we wean him off of the steroids without him relapsing? And as it turns out, weaning him off of those steroids put him into a real health crisis. One day I was working and Tony didn't come up to his little bed. So I came down to check on him. I could tell he was struggling to breathe a little bit. And so I actually packed him up and I took him to the emergency vet. They did some x-rays and some blood work, and they could see that he had pleural effusion, which is fluid in the chest cavity. So they sent me home with antibiotics, but he wasn't responding to the medications that he was on. And then Steve and I ended up calling our veterinarian, and he met us at the clinic, and it was a really rapid decline. We had to make a really tough decision to say goodbye. We were just starting to process our own grief, and we had no idea what we were about to experience with Apollo. You know, he lost his brother, his best buddy, his best friend. He was grieving.
He'd come to our bed and come in the bed and just sit there and cry for hours.
Really, the one thing they said was, you know, they'll grieve for up to 6 months. He only lived for 10 months after Tony died.
Yeah, I don't think Apollo really ever got over it.
I don't think so. He never stopped grieving. And one day I was working and I heard him crying, meowing in a really, he sounded in distress. And I came downstairs and I found him. He wasn't able to walk properly. He was falling over and he was just crying and wailing, and I scooped him up and I rushed him into the vet. And they discovered there that he had a really acute case of pancreatitis. He developed like a really weird gait when he walked. He didn't want to eat. So we took him into the vet. They gave him some fluids and some medications and took some blood and discovered that he had a really rare type of anemia. I had taken him in for a recheck on his blood work, and the vet called and said, you know, you have a few hours left here with him. We can't bring him back from this at this point. So I brought him home, and I called Steve home from work, and our veterinarian came to our home, and we put him to sleep. We said our goodbyes on our couch, and he passed really peacefully in his home where he was comfortable. I think you just go through such a complex web of emotions with that situation. You know, Tony dies, you have your own grief that you're processing, then there's Apollo and his grief, and then we have like guilt, and we have a strange sense of like relief knowing that Apollo wasn't suffering anymore, because he really did.
So there was like some relief knowing that they were back together.
We've done a few things since Tony and Apollo have passed to just keep their memory alive and honor them. We've received some beautiful gifts. My cousin, who's a very talented artist, gave us an incredible charcoal drawing of Tony and Apollo. And every year we plant orange flowers in our garden. After Tony died, I got his little paw print tattooed on my arm. And so today we are getting Apollo's paw print tattooed on us. We'll never forget them.